You are walking. The ground is frozen, and every step sends a dull ache up through your heel. A stretch of loose gravel forces you to slow down, feeling for smooth ground with your toes before you trust your weight to it. Mud clings between your toes. Somewhere behind you, the sun is dropping, and the cold is starting to bite harder than it did an hour ago. Now stop and think about this. Modern humans, or something very close to us, have existed for roughly 300,000 years. For most of that time, nobody wore anything on their feet, and yet our species walked out of Africa, crossed deserts, climbed mountains, and eventually reached nearly every corner of the planet on bare skin. Here's the part that surprises people. Shoes almost certainly weren't invented to look good. They weren't a fashion statement or a mark of status, not at first. The earliest foot coverings were a response to a problem the human body hadn't fully solved on its own. What happens when the environment gets more dangerous than your feet can handle? So, how did humans invent shoes? The human foot, on its own, is a remarkable piece of engineering. It absorbs shock, senses the ground, adjusts to slopes, and lets a person run for miles without stopping to think about it. Bare feet build calluses, they read terrain, and they grip better than most people expect. In the environments where humans evolved, feet like these were more than enough. But humans didn't stay in those environments. Over tens of thousands of years, groups of people pushed north into colder territory, climbed into higher altitudes, and crossed terrain covered in ice, jagged stone, and frozen ground that bare skin was never designed to withstand for long. The body that had been shaped for warm grasslands was now being asked to survive somewhere else entirely. And that gap between what the foot could handle and what the land demanded is where footwear begins. Nobody invented the shoe. Not in the way we imagine a single inventor sketching a design. Researchers generally agree that foot protection developed gradually, through small, practical decisions made over and over in different places by different people who never met each other. Picture someone with a foot cut open on a sharp rock or numb from a night in the cold. They reach for whatever is close by, a strip of animal hide, a handful of dry grass, a piece of bark, and wrap it around the foot. It isn't elegant. It probably isn't meant to last, but it works well enough to try again tomorrow. Multiply that moment across thousands of years and thousands of communities, and you start to see how a temporary fix could slowly turn into a technology. Here's the problem for anyone trying to study this history. Those early wrappings were made from exactly the kind of material that doesn't survive. Leather rots, grass breaks down, bark disintegrates. Stone tools from the same era can last hundreds of thousands of years buried in the ground, but a piece of ancient hide wrapped around a foot rarely gets that chance. So archaeologists are often left chasing a technology that mostly erased itself. Which raises the real question. If the shoes themselves are gone, how would we ever know when humans started wearing them? One possible answer isn't in the ground at all. It's in the bones. Researchers studying the human foot have noticed something curious about our smaller toes. When someone walks barefoot, those little toes flex and grip with every step, which keeps the bone dense and strong over a lifetime. But once a foot is supported by something stiffer, a wrapped hide, a sole, a shoe, the toes don't have to work as hard, and the bone in them can grow thinner over time. Anthropologist Eric Trinkhaus examined ancient foot bones from Europe and Asia and found that starting somewhere around 26,000 to 30,000 years ago, the small toe bones of some populations became noticeably lighter and weaker, even as their leg bones stayed just as strong as before. The evidence suggests something changed in how those feet were being used. The most likely explanation is that people had started wearing supportive footwear regularly enough to change their own anatomy. That's not proof of a specific shoe or a specific date. It's an indirect clue, one interpretation among researchers still debating the details, but it points to something worth sitting with. The first shoes may have vanished completely, and yet the people who wore them may have carried the evidence inside their own skeletons. Eventually, though, we do get to see the real thing. In 2008, in a cave in southern Armenia called Armenia 1, an archaeology student named Diana Zardarian uncovered a shoe pressed beneath a layer of sheep dung that had sealed it away from air and moisture for thousands of years. When researchers radiocarbon dated it, the result was startling. The shoe was roughly 5,500 years old, cut from a single piece of cowhide, and laced along the front and back to fit one specific foot. It remains the oldest known leather shoe in the world, and its construction is close enough to certain traditional shoe styles still made in parts of Europe today that some experts have called the resemblance genuinely uncanny. A few hundred years after that shoe was made, high in the Alps on the border of modern Italy and Austria, a man died in the snow. He's known today as Ötzi the Iceman, and the ice that killed him also preserved him, along with his gear, for over 5,000 years. His shoes turn out to be far more advanced than primitive footwear implies. Each one had a sole cut from bearskin, an upper made of deerskin, and inside, a net woven from bark fiber that held loose grass in place as insulation. When a modern shoe expert built an exact replica and hiked 12 miles through the same mountains in near-freezing temperatures, he reported that his feet stayed warm the entire way, with no blisters and no frostbite. Whoever made that shoe understood exactly what the Alps required. And these weren't isolated cases. Elsewhere, people were solving the same problem in different ways. Sandals woven from plant fiber, found in caves in the American West, are thought to be even older than the Armenian shoe, showing that separate groups of humans with no contact between them kept arriving at the same basic idea. Shoes didn't change what the human body could do on its own. What they changed was where that body was allowed to go. A person with wrapped, insulated feet could cross ice fields that would cripple bare skin in minutes. Hunters could travel farther, families could migrate through terrain that used to be off-limits, and entire regions of the planet became livable in new seasons. The foot stayed the same. The map got bigger. Once shoes stopped being just a defense against cold and stone, something else started happening to them. The material, the shape, the decoration, all of it began to say something about the person wearing it. In some ancient societies, particular styles were reserved for people of certain rank. Elsewhere, footwear marked profession or wealth or stage of life. The object built to protect a foot in the wild slowly became an object that told other people who you were before you said a word. Shoes eventually stopped showing only where people had walked. They began showing who those people were. That thread runs all the way to today. Modern shoes are safer, more cushioned, and more specialized than anything Ötzi could have imagined. But there's a quiet trade happening underneath that progress. Ancient people built their shoes around the exact ground they had to cross: sharp alpine stone, frozen tundra, dry desert scrub. Many of us now do the opposite. We build sidewalks, gyms, and floors, and then choose shoes to match a lifestyle rather than a landscape. Neither approach is right or wrong. It's just a different relationship between the foot and the world it walks on. So, how did humans invent shoes? Not in one flash of insight and not in one place. They came from thousands of ordinary people, facing thousands of ordinary problems. Cold feet, torn skin, a long walk still ahead of them, and reaching for whatever material was close enough to try. Slowly, across tens of thousands of years, a strip of hide wrapped around an aching foot became a technology that helped carry our species into nearly every environment on Earth. Somewhere back in that opening scene on that frozen, rocky ground, a person knelt down, picked up a piece of hide, and wrapped it around a foot that had had enough of the cold. You're still wearing what they started.